victories with faith, like we're going to talk about this morning. Well, I closed 2 weeks ago talking about the life of David and Goliath. They're talking about the event of David and Goliath, I think is a more accurate way to say it. We talked about what that means, and really the conclusion of that is it's really what Christ has done for us that allows us to have the faith that David had, that David expressed in defeating of Goliath. It would be difficult, I think, for any of us, at least it would be for me, to say, you know what, everybody else is backing off. I'll take care of Goliath. I think that would have been difficult for me. And I made that point. But after David did it, man, everybody was on fire. Everybody said, oh, let's go, let's get him. And they just completely destroyed, on that occasion anyway, they destroyed the Philistines. But I think it was because of what David did. And in a sense, I think that story is about Christ and what Christ has done. And so when you think about the faith that David had, the way that I transition that into the New Testament is think about who had that kind of faith, or who should have had that kind of faith. And really the answer I get is the apostles. But when I read a passage like was read for us just a moment ago by Henry, it's the apostles who said to the Lord, increase our faith. I mean, of all the people in the New Testament who, in my judgment, could have said, or probably should have said, increase my faith or increase our faith, it's the apostles. And I'm thinking, they're the last people on earth. Who would have said that? And yet, they did that. And they asked Jesus to do that. And they asked him to do that because what he had just said in verses 1 through 4 was a very difficult thing. You got to forgive people multiple times. He really says, when they ask you to forgive them, and Jesus takes it a step further and says, no, if it happens all the time, in essence, it's hyperbole. 70 times 7 is not 490 times. It's if it happens all day, every day, you forgive them. To which the apostles said, Lord, increase our faith. I can imagine them saying that, and I get that. But the 12 men who Jesus selected were handpicked. I don't think he went out and said, you know what, these are the 12 people who would make my best apostles. I don't know. I probably shouldn't have said that. I don't know what was in the Lord's mind when he picked Peter and when he picked, Andrew. I don't know what was in his mind. I don't know what the criteria was. I don't know what the credentials were. I don't exactly know what he was looking for. But I tell you what I do know is they were flawed. They were like me, and they're like you. They were flawed. And I think some of that was intentional, but because they were flawed, it helps me then when I say, well, what kind of faith can I achieve? And I am always stating what the apostles stated. Lord, I need my faith increased. I need it increased. And what gives me hope that he'll answer that is because he increased their faith, and they were flawed. All of them. And if there's one thing I know about myself, it's this: I'm flawed. And if there's one thing I know about you, and I don't know you that well, really, I don't know the deepest parts of you, but if I know something about you, I do know this: you're flawed. You're flawed. That's the great thing about faith, is Jesus doesn't say, I want you to have faith, but you can't be flawed to have that. No, what he says is, because you're flawed, your faith can lift you. You can rise, as we just sang. You can rise on wings of faith. That is a great thing. And even though, and it seems like, and maybe this is me, but it seems like every song we sing talks about the difficulties in this world and the wanting to go to the better world. Does it not seem that way to you? It seems like every song we sing, and sometimes you probably think, well, it seems like every lesson you preach has to do with this, and we're going to, and I get that. And I think that's just because that's the reality of life. I mean, every phrase of the song we just sang had something to do with that. And I listened carefully, and as we went through those verses, I kept thinking, man, it's saying the same thing over and over and over again. But it's saying so we can rise on wings of faith. We rise. We get out of it. We move away from it. And that's really what this is all about. Us coming together today is about helping us achieve, and I think that's the right word, it's helping us achieve faith that gets us out of this mess. It is a mess. This is a mess. Now, he gives us help to live in the mess, but it's a mess. And it's a mess that will end. And that'll affect all of us. These apostles were all flawed. They were all flawed for a variety of reasons. They were flawed because they lacked spiritual understanding. Which is really, as I think about that, I won't say it's remarkable, but I think it's a little odd that they were with him all the time they were with him, and they still had a lot of questions. Just take your Bible. I want you to turn to some of these passages. Turn over to John 13. In this section, I'm going to have some passages on the screen in a minute, but I'm not going to have them in this particular section because I want you to look. I want you to turn and look with me. This is John 13, beginning in verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. He came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. So Simon said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. I mean, if you're going to do it, let's do it. Let's get it all the way. And Jesus said to him, he who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not all of you. And, of course, he's referring to Judas. And so when you get over to really the story of Judas, and we're talking in verse 26, Jesus answered, is it he whom I have given a piece of bread when I have dipped it? It is he. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, what you do, do quickly. But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. Nobody knew. Now, in that particular instance, I'm not sure that maybe they should have known, but that gives me the sense of they didn't know yet. And Jesus is saying, you may not know that yet, but you're going to soon know. And Judas is certainly going to know soon what happened. But the apostles struggled with spiritual understanding, which I find really a little bit hard. They kept asking him things, and he kept telling them, and he would even say, you don't understand now, but you will. You will understand. And so that particular flaw gives me hope, because there's things I don't understand. There are a lot of things in this world I don't understand. You the same way? But one day we will. And what takes us from not understanding to one day we will is faith. That's what this faith does, you see. They struggle with pride. I'm not going to take the time to go to Mark 9 or Matthew 20. But they kept saying, Lord, who's the greatest? It wasn't a matter of we're greater than you, but it was who can get the closest to you? Who's next to you? Not who is you, but who's next to you? Who is the greatest? And even James and John's mother said, they said, you go ask him. And she did. Because it was a matter of pride. And of course, what that is just, it's just pride. And we have that too. And we don't need that. He doesn't want us to have that. They struggle with that. They struggle with moments where their faith just simply faltered. Turn over to Matthew 14. That's a passage I do want us to read just a little out of. Matthew 14. You'll remember this, I'm sure. Remember this event. Matthew 14, Peter's walking on the water. He starts sinking. Look at verse 30. Let's read beginning of verse 30. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, Truly you are the Son of God. This is a story about Peter and Peter having a little faith, but this is bigger than that. This is more than that. This wasn't just about Peter's faith. This was about all of them. Because when they got back into the boat, they all worshiped him. So don't just think, well, Peter, you didn't have much faith. I think this is all of them. But what Peter had done and what Jesus had done prompted them to worship him even on this occasion. And then let me look at one final thing. Turn over to Luke 22. This is a story that's familiar to us. I'm going to read a little bit out of Luke's account, although other Gospels talk about this. And I think I know why, because when you deny Jesus, you're going to get talked about. And when it's prophesied that you're going to deny him, you're sure going to get talked about. And that's exactly what happened here in Luke 22, beginning in verse 57. But he denied him. This is Peter denied Jesus, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." That's number one. Verse 58, and after a little while, another saw him and said, "You also are of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." That's number two. And verse 60 says, or 59 says, then after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, "Surely this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean." Verse 60, but Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you're saying." Immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. That was three. 3 strikes, you're out, you're done. I love verse 59. Don't let this pass. Then after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed. You see all that language? Don't you imagine after those first two, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not one of his. I don't follow him." An hour passed, and then another one came and confidently said, and said, "No, you are one of his." An hour had passed. What do you think happened between denial number 2 and denial number 3? What do you think Peter's feeling? And yet, he still, having been given an hour to think about that, he still said, "No, that's not me. I don't know who you're talking about." So, they all were flawed, which is why they said, "Increase our faith." See, that's what, I'm going to start with you. That's what you do. That's when you pray, that's what you pray. Because you know you better than anybody else. So this is what you pray. You pray, "Lord, I'm flawed. And the only 2 people who know that, Lord, are me and you. The only 2 people who know it exclusively and completely are you and me. I am flawed. You know that, I know that, but I don't want to be flawed. I don't want to be that way, so would you help me?" Well, that's what they said. See, they're flawed, but they're good guys. You see, you're flawed, but you're a good person. You see, I'm flawed, but I'm deep down a good person. I want to be better. You want to be better. As bad as you and I are, we want to be better. They wanted to be better. That's why they said, "Lord, you got to help us." They wanted this kind of faith. And here's kind of what I want to move on to right now for just a few minutes. They did not give up. You remember, you may not, I do. Remember when you were a kid, you wrestled? Remember you wrestled with kids? And one kid typically who was the bigger kid, you know where I'm going with this, Davis? You do, don't you? John, you know where we're going with it? I bet you do. I'll talk to y'all about that later, who wins most of these. But you wrestle, and what happens is one gets on top of the other, and I hope you don't choke them. I mean, at least let them breathe. Don't let them get up. And you stay on top of them for how long? Till they say what? I give up. And you roll over and you let them up. But you won and they lost. When they say, I give or I give up, they lose. And that's exactly what Satan wants you to do. That's exactly what he wants you to do. He wants you to say, I quit. I give up. That's what he wants. That's what he wanted these men. That's what he wanted the apostles to say, I quit and I give up because this is too hard. I've tried and I just want to give up. The apostles didn't want to give up. That's the good thing. That's part of what this lesson is about. They did not want to give up. They could have given up, but they didn't want to. They said, increase our faith. Help us. We're this level. We need to be at this level. And I think that's what they wanted to happen. They wanted to be better, and that's the quality. Folks, that's the quality that has to prevail. But I want you to think about something. I want you to think about this church. There have been people who quit the Lord. All of us got people on our minds right now who have been a part of this church. They've been a part of our local assembly, but in terms of their life, some of them have even stated it. I quit. I'm done. And they quit. And when they quit, they lose. And we want them to be better. We want us to be better. When we reach the point where we just want to roll over and quit and say, I'm done, I lose, I quit, I don't think any of us want to do that. Now, it may happen. I don't want to do that. But quitting's the easy way. Quitting is the easy way. There are things that you go through. There are things, I know for a fact, there are people who are sitting in this auditorium right now. I've been looking at you. You're going through hard things. But the key is you're going through them. You're not quitting. You haven't given up. That's the good thing. Is it hard? Yes. Have you given up? No. That's what you can't do. You can't give up. Because when you give up, you lose. And the apostles knew that. And Jesus did that. They didn't give up on him. And listen, he didn't give up on them. And it's a great thing. I don't care how bad a circumstance may be. I'll tell you this. There are folks, you know this. There are folks who are living in Tennessee this morning who are dealing with a faith that is hurting because of an explosion that killed people. And my guess is, I can't even begin to understand the heartache that those folks have because of the accident that took place, but they're having to wrestle with faith. Don't you think they're wrestling with some of that today? Don't you think they're wrestling with, Lord, why did this happen? They're wrestling with it, but my prayer is that their faith gets them through it, just like my prayer for you and me is that my faith, your faith, gets us through wherever we are on this line of difficulty. And I pray that it will for them, and I pray that it will for us as well. I know the apostles didn't quit because I read things like Acts 5. They'd been beaten for preaching, and then they brought them, and when they brought them, they set them before the council. This is the apostles. And the high priest asked them, saying, did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, you fill Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood on us. But Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. I'm not even going to read the rest of it. You know what the rest of it says. me tell you, the gospel, the story of faith in the Gospels is not the story of faith in the book of Acts. The story of Peter's denial that's found in the Gospels is not the story of faith of Peter in Acts. It's not the same thing. The book of all the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're all filled with flawed apostles and flawed disciples and flawed people. But when you get to the book of Acts, you're not talking about that kind of faith. When you read Paul, what happened to Paul, when you read the missionary journeys, we're not talking about an earlier faith of Paul. We're talking about a stronger faith of Paul. We're talking about a faith of Paul that's achieved. It's increased to a point where nothing's going to stop him from having that faith. It doesn't matter what happens. You can beat him. You can throw him overboard. You can do whatever you want to. He's not going to lose his faith. That's the kind of faith. That's the kind of faith that we're talking about. You know, too often we read about what we ought to be without being what we ought to be. You ever thought about that? Too often, man, we hear lessons, we study, we know, and we read about what we ought to be, and we never get to where we ought to be. And we need to do better with that. We need to be what the Hebrew writer says, but beloved, we are confident of better things concerning you, yes, things that are accompany salvation. Well, what is that? Though we speak in this manner, for God is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love which you have shown toward his name, and that you minister to the saints and do minister. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope until the end. That you do not become sluggish, here we go, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. There you go. What he's saying is you haven't quit. You haven't quit, you're not going to quit, and that's what I need you to do. You know, I think there's joy in achieving something. You ever gone through a church problem? You ever gone through a church problem? You ever gone through a problem like in a local church where something happens and when it happens, you're just like, man, how are we going to get through this? Well, you get through it, right? And when you get through it, while it may be hard to deal with, and while what's happened may be difficult, what's happened is your faith has brought you through it. You didn't quit. You didn't throw up your hands and say, you know what, boy, that's terrible. We're not going to overcome that. It's never going to be what it was. You don't do that. You just keep fighting through it because your faith brings you out on the other side. Same thing was true of things that affect us when we have difficulties in life. When we hear bad news. Well, this is what's happening to you. This may be how much longer you have to live, or whatever what the case may be. When we have things like that affect us, you look. You don't quit. You look stronger at what wings of faith do. They take you to a better place. Now, I will tell you, you've heard me say this a lot of times. That's real easy to preach. But that's hard to do. And I hope that I have that kind of faith. I hope you have that kind of faith. It is a faith that conquers. It is a faith that, regardless of what happens in your life, you just stay strong. You know, there are some people in my mind and in my acquaintances, and you're some of them. If I know you like I think I know you, it doesn't matter what happens to you. You're going to stay strong. You're never going to denounce God. You're going to be as strong spiritually as possibly can till the very end. And most of you in this auditorium, I could easily put into that category. From my perspective. But from my perspective, not everybody. from my perspective. I don't know you. I know your heart. But just from what I observe, I'm not sure that would be everybody. Would it be you? Would it be you? No matter what happens, you're going to keep your faith, and you're going to ask God, I want you to increase my faith. And I'm going to have that regardless. I'm going to rise, regardless of what happens to this, I'm going to rise on wings of faith. That's the choice that you need to be making. And you don't need to wait till you have to decide that. You need to decide that now. This is who I am. This is how I live. This is what my life is about. And no matter what comes in my life, this is who I'm going to be. And you need to do what the Hebrew writer continued to say in Hebrews 12. When he says, therefore we also, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, those people in Hebrews 11 who they did that. They did all that. They stayed strong in the faith. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us, whoever thus is, let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, looking unto Jesus. I love this. The author, he starts it, and the finisher, he ends it, of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And if I may add a little bit, who's waiting for people of faith to join him. But we got to all get there, folks. We got to have that kind of faith that elevates us out of this mess and puts us in the very place that's anything but what's here. That's what faith does. That's why our prayer needs to be, I think, for the Lord to increase our faith. Increase our faith, Lord. Increase our faith. May God help us to do that. He is the beginning and He is the end. If you're in this audience this morning and faith is not a part of your life, I'm going to say something to you. Kindly, if faith in Jesus is not a part of your life, you're going down a road that is leading nowhere good. Nowhere good. So commit to Him. Commit to Him the way He asked you to commit to Him. Believe that He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Be sorry for how you've lived your life selfishly and for yourself, and live for Him. Commit to live for Him. And confess to the world your faith in Him, that He is the Lord of heaven and earth. And then do what He asks you to do, which is be buried in water so that your sins can be washed away. The New Testament is clear about that, my friend. It is the point of baptism where your sins are washed away. May God help all of us to not only understand it, but to do it. If we can help you this morning to do that very thing, would you come while we stand, while we sing?
There's a great day coming.